Hello, welcome to Film Talk. My name is Bob Dutton. I am your leader for these Film Talk series of film analysis classes presented to you by the nonprofit Martha's Vineyard Film Society, located on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. If you'd like to explore the Martha's Vineyard Film Society in any deeper way, please go to our website at www.mvfilmsociety.com. Today we're going to be dealing with the subject of conflict, and why that is so important is it's one of the key elements of storytelling. Conflict. And we all have conflicts. We go from conflict to conflict to conflict. As a matter of fact, I'm conflicted now whether I should wear this or should I wear something like this. I'm torn. Wow. Or even like this. Whew. Looks like I'm dancing even when I'm sitting down. And so as we take a look into the world of conflict, we'll have to understand what conflict is, the various types of conflicts that are going on, and how they apply to everyday living as well. If you have not gone through other classes, this class might make you want to go back and take a look at something like status, take a look at something like texture, take some look at emotional content, because or plot structure, because all these things put together will help you understand how a story is told. So today, even though we're focusing on conflict, I'm going to show you some short films that are all from the TV sketch comedy Key and Peele. So they are various stories that have various types of conflicts and can best demonstrate the various things that we are going to be talking about today. Let me send this to you in an important way. Conflict is essential because it is through conflict that we develop our skills. We develop our understanding of how the world works, because as we try to pursue an objective, we find that the conflicts, the things that get in our way, we have to learn to deal with those things that get in our way, and we develop strength, not only just physical strength, but sometimes intellectual strength, political strength, social strength, all kinds of different strengths in order to achieve victory. And so we are constantly going through a series of conflicts. Some of them are very small. It's like determining out, like, where are my car keys, to it's like, I've got to go to the bathroom, should I wait or should I go now? It's like, well, I told you to go before we left, but you didn't pay attention, so that ends up creating conflict. Let's move this along, first of all, with an idea that is going to be important, is that without conflict, stories don't really exist, because you're just watching somebody go about their day with no conflict, because there's nothing's getting in the way, there's no interest for us. So I'm going to show you an example. From Key and Peele, here is a story of somebody who does not have a conflict. So this prisoner has no conflict. He can get out whenever he wants to. Just tells this security guard and says, you got to let me out of here. Oh, okay. There's no conflict there. So there's nothing preventing you from moving forward. It's like, oh, that was easy. And therefore it was basically, it was interesting because it is unusual, but in a real story where anybody can get whatever they want whenever they want it, that doesn't allow us to grow. But it can be funny, but after a while, as an audience member, that's really boring when there's no problem. There's nothing getting in the way of somebody getting what they want. So let's continue. Here is a an example of a conflict that you should probably be readily familiar with. This is a dealing with other people, and so this is a Key and Peele scene called "How to Ruin a Joke." And so we now head through our slideshow of that leads us into the world of conflict. So if you will follow along with me, you're going to miss my face for a little bit. I'll be back. And there's a progression here, so stick with me, if you will. First thing I need to tell you is the best sentence, or the most important sentence I ever give people who want to analyze a story, and that is, of course, every story is about someone who wants something and is having trouble getting it. And so by following that sentence by itself, if you can understand that sentence and how it is used properly, and apply the sentence to a movie or a story of your choice, you will better understand it. And so that is one of the values of this class here. So let's take a look at this, not only the sentence, but the progression of where we go from here. So next thing is conflict. If every story is about somebody who wants something and is having trouble getting it, the having trouble part is our conflict. Our conflict is our problem of opposing forces that is the core of the story. So these forces have to be fighting against each other. Two wrestlers who get in the ring and don't go at it are probably on the same side. Therefore, they're not opposing each other. Opposing or opposite. That is important. So let's move on here. A conflict in a story, you have what is known as a protagonist and an antagonist. So let us take a look at the definitions of these two words and what they really mean in context to a story. So a protagonist is defined primarily by, this is the character whose story it is. This is the character who we're following, or at least their story we're following. That does not necessarily mean that they are the main character. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is the character who has the most screen time. This is a character whose story it is. And sometimes when you recognize that a story is not about the main character, but about somebody else, suddenly your understanding of the story changes significantly. And I will use an example, as I have used in the past, of It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life is not the story of George Bailey and the Building and Loan. This is the story of Clarence the Angel. Because Clarence is trying, his objective is to save George. And so that is why we spend the first hour learning about George's background and who George is and his life story. And so when you realize, hey, this is really about Clarence trying to get his wings, that's his objective, then you understand the story in a completely different way, hopefully, or a much more satisfying way. And when I was first teaching this class about 25 years ago, somebody came in to me and asked me, said, I tried to apply all the information you gave me to It's a Wonderful Life, and it doesn't make any sense, because George's objective is to either kill himself or it is to get out of this town. And by the end of this movie, he's achieved neither one of those things, and yet we're happy for him. So that was probably not the right path to take. And it wasn't. It's the story of Clarence the Angel. So let's move on. So what is an antagonist? An antagonist is the person or thing that puts up the obstacles that impede the protagonist from achieving the objective. Every story is about somebody who wants something and is having trouble getting it. Well, here is the having trouble getting it because something's getting in the way, and that is the antagonist. So let's take a look at the story from our sentence. Every story is about somebody who wants something and is having trouble getting it. And now let us update that. Every story is about a protagonist with an objective who confronts obstacles. If you can clearly define the protagonist, the objective, and the obstacles, you understand the story. Good for you. So let's go back to the split between protagonist and antagonist. Pro, of course, means for, and anti means against. So they are against each other. They are the opposing forces. And because the protagonist must have an objective and the antagonist puts up the obstacles, I would like you to look at this in a slightly different manner. Don't think of every conflict as being protagonist versus antagonist. Think of it as objective versus obstacles. Objective versus obstacles. And why is that important? Well, let's get to this. You remember going through grade school, high school, junior high, middle school, and this teachers tell you, okay, the types of conflict, there is man versus man. I don't use the word man, and there's a very specific reason for that. One is that maybe it's not male, maybe it's not singular, maybe it is not even human. You know, the toys in Toy Story, they're not human. Harriet, you know, the movie Harriet, that's not about a man, it's about a woman. And so you start to say, okay, well, let's use the word individual. And that'll be important for another reason, which I'll mention in just a minute. And so when we take a look at these obstacles, objective versus obstacles, there always comes this question. Can there be more than one protagonist? And I know English teachers who do not know the answer to this question. Shame on you. The correct answer is yes, with one condition. And that one condition is the key. And the information and the clue is right in front of you. Can there be more than one protagonist? And the answer is yes, if they share an objective, because it is not about the protagonist, it is about the objective. So if you are watching a baseball team playing and your team is up against the other team, everybody on your team wants to win, is trying to win, and therefore they are the protagonist, at least in your mind, because that's whose story you're following. But if there is a member of that baseball team who is being paid an amount of money to throw the game to make sure that the team doesn't win, so maybe it's the catcher. Maybe somebody says, hey, you know, I'm going to give you $25,000 if you can throw this game. That catcher is no longer part of the objective and therefore is not the protagonist. Everybody on the team besides the catcher would be your protagonist, because the protagonist must share an objective. So let's keep going. So let's change our sentence yet again. Every story is about an individual objective confronting obstacles. Every story is about an individual objective confronting obstacles. So let's keep going. There are 4 types of obstacles. Individual versus, number 1, is another individual. And this is very simple to understand. 2 people playing tennis. Individual versus individual. Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Yeah, okay. Harry Potter versus Voldemort. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Yes, Voldemort. Individual versus individual. It makes it kind of easy, and we would like stories to be as simple as that, but often they are not, and therefore there are other obstacles that can get in the way. And those antagonists can be individual versus self. If you think about the little angel and devil sitting on your shoulders, you know, the angel sits on the right side, the devil sits on the left side, and the angel says, oh, be a good person, return that money, and the devil says, no, keep the money, you could really use it right now. Your rent is due. And so that conscience, you're trying to deal with your conscience, what should I do, devil, angel, that is a problem of individual versus self. It may be a matter of self, maybe your confidence in yourself. You know, you want to ask somebody out on a date, and it's like, oh, but I don't have the confidence to ask that person out, even though I really, really like them. Dealing with that issue is important. And often within plot structure, and you can go back another class to see this, there is a point just before the climax, which is another point in which the problem of self is solved before the other problem, the exterior problem, is solved. And sometimes I need to overcome my nervousness in order to make sure that other thing happens. You know, maybe it's, I know I need to call the cops, but I don't. I'm nervous that I'm going to get in trouble if I don't call the cops. But when you call the cops and realize, oh yes, you were in trouble, you've got to work on this. And so solving the problem of self before solving another problem is very typical of films. So look for that in some of the films that you're watching. Next is the antagonist being society, so individual versus society. And when you deal with much larger issues, when you're dealing with the government, when you're dealing with trying to convince the world that racism needs to be eradicated or that sexism is a problem, some people, are fighting society in terms of trying to get things done. Next is outside forces. Now, there's a key. What are outside forces? Outside forces are forces that you cannot see, you cannot control, and are everywhere. So, for instance, time. So, individual force versus time. So you've ever heard of a story that is a race against time? How about the movie 1917? In which a message needs to be delivered in time. It is a race against time, and there is your conflict, because it's one against the other. Or perhaps you're dealing with a battle with addiction. A battle is a conflict, is a fight. An outside force is, alcoholism, or perhaps it is being just the addiction itself. That can be an outside force. Outside forces can be fate. Romeo and Juliet dealt with the subject of fate. Others deal with fate. Things that are out of your control. Things that you cannot see. So time, people say, I can see time. Look, there's a clock up in the wall. No, that is a measurement of time. That is not time itself. It's sort of like man versus nature. Well, nature is an outside force. Weather is an outside force. Because you can't control it and you can't see it. Say, oh, I can see weather. I can see rain. No, you can see precipitation, but you can't see weather. There's a big difference there, because if you look up into the sky and it's just a bunch of clouds, can you see the wind? No. And it's not that wind is an outside force; it's that weather is an outside force, because weather cannot be seen. Weather is something a little bit different. I can see a tree. That's nature. Well, no, you're seeing a tree, because nature exists everywhere. Death can be an outside force. There are lots of things that follow in that list, and you will discover from yourself as you try to analyze films. So, next we're going to go into the other world of examples of these types of films. So, hold on a second. Okay, let's get right into it. Here is another Key and Peele sketch. This one is about bagels. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's about bagels. And the objective is, I want a bagel. So in that story, was the objective to get a bagel? No. The objective was to stop someone from taking a bagel. And so that led to other problems, because the boss says, hey, you're being too loud. You deal with it. And so this is meandering down a path that we are not all that familiar with, because it doesn't really stay to the path of what we expect. And so the objective is, how do I stop this person from getting a bagel? Becomes much more interesting because of the obstacles set forth by the parameters of, say, this is what you must do, and your job is on the line. And so, important. It's sort of like the way I'm dressed. I've been dressed 2 different ways already. And the reason why that is important is because maybe my objective is to make you understand conflict. Maybe it's, I want you to like me. Maybe it's, I want you to follow through and take me seriously. And we question ourselves. It's like, oh, should I do this or should I do that? What is best for my objective? And so Is it best for me to, wear two different sets of clothes in order to make a point, or does that seem silly? And so I'm conflicted with myself. So I have to decide that for myself. What's going to get me the best result? Which leads us also to the objective of, dealing with fate, because I don't know what the answer is. I don't know which one's going to reward me in the way I want it to, and one might lead me down the wrong path, and the other, who knows? But fate has the answers for me, and so in time I will figure it out. And as I watch, and as I continue to take the factors of fate coming into, it's like, oh, somebody just spilled something on you. Oh, then maybe switch that out, or maybe somebody made a comment, and it's like, oh, I take that comment, seriously, and so I start to shift who I am and what I do in order to help me in the end to overall get those objectives, whatever they might be. And so we lead our lives through a series of objectives and the various conflicts that we face, trying to figure out, how do I achieve what I'm trying to achieve? That is the world of conflict. You know who Benjamin Franklin is, of course. Benjamin Franklin once posited this idea, and he wrote a small piece that's called For Want of a Nail. And if you have heard that phrase before, for want of a nail, you understand where I'm going with this. Because he wrote, it's like, for the want of a nail, a shoe was lost. In other words, a horseshoe couldn't be put on a horse because it was missing a nail. And because of the shoe, for the want of the shoe, the horse was lost. And therefore, because the horse didn't have four horseshoes on, it couldn't actually participate in going out. And for want of a horse, a rider was lost. And for want of a rider, a message was lost. And for want of a message, a battle was lost. And for the want of a battle, a whole war was lost. In other words, how something can be important just in a minimal way. So for the want of a nail, an entire war was lost because one blacksmith did not have a nail to put one horseshoe onto one horse, because that one horse would have led, the rider of it delivering a message to get that message across. And that message may have been important in terms of winning the entire war. And so, coming down to how important something is, you might not know how important it is because it may have repercussions down the line. And that those repercussions will lead to other complications and other, objectives achieved or not achieved. And so the importance of one little thing may have repercussions. For the want of a nail, I'm going to put up a slide now, which is from the plot structure class. This is a mountain, and it shows the various crags in the mountain. In other words, it's sort of the roller coaster effect. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Now, if you look at this very carefully, you see that as it goes up and as it goes down, that is where the tension goes up and down towards achieving an objective. And when the tension goes down, that means an objective is more easily acquired, or more likely to be acquired. And so we talk about these because if you look at the whole mountain, it is one mountain made of lots and lots of little tiny mountains below it. And that's important. So when we look at an objective, we're actually looking at something called a super objective. And if your super objective is to cure cancer, you have a series of smaller objectives you need to get through in order to get to the big objective. Now, they may be something like, okay, in order to cure cancer, you need to become a doctor. In order to become a doctor, you need to graduate from medical school. In order to graduate from medical school, you need to graduate from college. In order to graduate from college, you need to graduate from high school. In order to graduate from high school, you have to graduate 4 years of language, if English as your first language. In order to do that, you're going to have to be able to write. You're going to have to be able to read and acknowledge. You need to know grammar. So you may not pass your ninth grade English class because you didn't study for a test, and because you didn't study for that test, you're not going to graduate from that class, and therefore you're not going to graduate from high school, you're not going to graduate from college, you're not going to graduate from medical school, you're not going to be able to cure cancer for the want of a nail. In this next scene, desire is going to be an antagonist. Is really, really wanting something, even though you know you shouldn't want it, is an obstacle that a character has to face. This is simply referred to as marbles. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes a story is not about what you think it is. In this case, the boss seems to have been the protagonist, and what he was doing was testing a new employee as to whether he had the stamina to decline the marbles. And sometimes it's like, well, I'm just testing you to see if you're right for the job. And sometimes we test other people in little ways to see if they're ready for something bigger. And so this was not about the employee, this was about the boss. So keep that in mind, that you cannot analyze a story until it is over. So not until it's over do you have any idea what is really going on. Because if I cut out the last 30 seconds of that skit or that sketch, it wouldn't have made any sense to you. Now, not all antagonists know that they're actually antagonists. If you think about driving, you can come up with a lot of ideas about conflicts. Is that while you are driving, the driver in front of you is an antagonist because it's making it more difficult for you to achieve your goal, which is to get wherever you're going. And suppose it's a little, somebody driving in their car and they're going very slowly, or they're talking on their phone, or they're distracted somehow. Or maybe they're just a terrible driver, or maybe they've got a terrible car, but they're going too slowly for you, and they are making it more difficult for you to get where you're going quickly. And that person is an antagonist, but they don't realize necessarily that they are an antagonist. They're doing the best job that they can. And sometimes it's not the person in front of you, but the person 2 people in front of you, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 cars ahead of you. I know of the times when people are spending time trying to find a parking space, and what they don't realize is there's so much traffic behind them that they're blocking up intersections a block away, simply because they're stopping traffic in order to wait for somebody to pull out of a parking space. They become an antagonist to all those people who can't even see them, because they're up on on another street, around the corner, so they can't be seen. But they are an antagonist because they're slowing down the traffic for everybody else, making it more difficult for everybody else to achieve their objective of getting to their location. So, antagonists don't necessarily know that they are antagonists. Here's another short clip. This is about marketing, of people who dial up and want you to buy something over the phone. See if you can figure out what kind of objective. Obviously, the objective is to make a sale. But as you watch it, you'll see that the obstacles, the conflict, keeps shifting. And now it is time for me to give you my feature film recommendations. Films that deal very much with the sense of conflict. Remember, there are four types of conflict: individual, versus self, versus outside forces, and versus society. Each of these films has multiple conflicts going on, which is always important. Obviously, multiple characters is multiple conflicts, but in some of these, you're dealing very specifically with society. And society being a pressure in terms of achievement. And so I'll start off with the biggest one of all, which is last year's Harriet, which is the story of Harriet Tubman, starring Cynthia Erivo as the founder of the Underground Railroad. Obviously, the government is a huge factor here, the South versus the North, as well as the slaves versus the slave traders, the slave owners. There's male versus female. There's so many different conflicts going on here, and that is wonderful. And so part of it is, Harriet Tubman's confidence in herself, her ability to get things done. That conflict with self. This is a terrific film. I highly recommend Harriet. From 2019. Also from 2019, with conflict, you have to have a murder mystery. So why not start with the most recent one, Knives Out, which was Academy Award nominee for Best Original Screenplay. This comes from writer-director Ryan Johnson and has an all-star cast. This is one of those, big whodunits, even though it really is not as much of a whodunit as determining all of the underlying facts and the timeline and all. There's so many different things going on. But with murder mysteries, you have multiple characters, each with their own alibis, and they're saying, I did not do it. And so we need to weigh each of those and their reliabilities, whether they are telling the truth, whether their alibis hold water, and their motivations as well. So Knives Out is a terrific film with Daniel Craig as the detective. Next, we're going to go back many years into 1982's E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Here, the government again is playing the bad guy, particularly with the relationship between Elliot and E.T. and the government as the government tries to figure out what's going on. And so many layers. And when we talk about layers, maybe go back and watch the class on texture. And this is a good film that has a wonderful texture to it because of its conflicts, because of the multiple conflicts going on. And so watch this carefully and maybe even jot down notes about what the various conflicts are that you see in this film. And if you haven't seen the film in a while, it's time to come back. It's like home, E.T. phone home. So that's it. Also on my list is my favorite Shakespeare on film, 1968's Romeo and Juliet, directed by Franco Zeffirelli, the Italian film director. A marvelous film. I first saw this film in high school, and Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting, I fell in love with both of them watching this film, and how could you not? They are a terrific pair, and of course, multiple conflicts going on here with all of those who are trying to get in their way, those who are trying to help them, those who are the others who are fighting for Juliet's love. This is a really well cut film, and I don't mean in terms of the editing, but in terms of the dialogue. Shakespeare, you usually need to cut it down to apply it to film, and Zeffirelli and his team did a great job of cutting Romeo and Juliet down to a very core story, and it's beautifully told with some wonderful leads. Next is one of our favorite musicals, and that, of course, is 1952's Singin' in the Rain, written by Adolph Green and Betty Comden, starring Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor and Debbie Reynolds. It is the story of the movement from silent films to the talkies, and there's a whole lot of struggle just within the industry trying to make that change. But each actor also needed suddenly to have a a presentable voice, and that is where a lot of the comedy comes in from this terrific film. Considered the greatest musical of all time for film, this is 1952's Singin' in the Rain. Enjoy. Next, my personal favorite film of all time is 1940's Pinocchio from the Walt Disney Studios. I think the story here is magnificent. The artwork is just unbeatable. Visually gorgeous film, but a great theme, great characterizations as well, and of course you're dealing with the big question of self. So, individual versus self, and in this case, the self or the conscience takes the form of Jiminy Cricket. So you can actually see yourself, at least your conscience, on your outside trying to help you. So that is the big struggle there, the individual versus self. But there's also society, and there are outside forces. It's worth watching, but it's even better when you analyze it and you look at all of the flavors of this marvelous film. So, 1940s Pinocchio. Let's talk a little bit about Pinocchio and the conflicts within it. In the story, Geppetto is the one with the objective. He wants to have a real boy. He wants to have a son. And the Blue Fairy comes along, and she sees Pinocchio and thinks, okay, he will make a real boy. But she then instructs Pinocchio, says, if you want to be a real boy, you have to do three things. You have to prove that you are brave, you have to prove that you are truthful, and you have to prove that you are unselfish. And so then the objective then becomes not Geppetto's, but it becomes Pinocchio's. That's what he needs to do in order to achieve his goal. Geppetto's sort of out of the story because he's asleep. He doesn't know what's going on. And so as Pinocchio needs to go through his journey in order to achieve his objective of becoming a real boy, he faces a series of antagonists that get in his way. So let's talk a little bit about those antagonists. One of them is himself. Is that he's got a problem because he's got to prove to be brave and truthful and unselfish, and that's easier said than done. And he's got to fight his own natural urges to tell a lie and to back out and to be selfish. And so that's the interior struggle, the individual versus self. Now on the outside, he's got to face a variety of other characters, and so those conflicts of individual versus individual. He deals with Monstro, the whale, of Stromboli, the puppeteer, of the people who come, the other characters who come along. What's his name? Honest John comes and says, "Oh yes, I'm going to make you an actor." And so Honest John is an individual versus individual conflict there. He also has to deal with the outside forces of, or actually the societal forces of what society expects from people. They expect people to be honest and kind to others. And so those ideals, even though he's got to fight with himself, are also societal issues. So those are things that he's got to contend with just even outside of his own body, that he lives in a society that expects certain things of him. And that's it for our feature film recommendations. I will also ask you, if you have other films to add to this list, please write them down in the comment section below. If you would like to subscribe, by all means, you can subscribe down here, and that will allow you the opportunity to be among the first to know when a new class comes out. We try to do new classes every week or two. This is class number 10, so class number 11 will be coming down the line soon enough. What it's about, I really don't know at this point, but we'll get there soon enough. In the meantime, if you care to like us or share this with friends, please do so. And if you'd like to make a donation or learn more about the Martha's Vineyard Film Society, please go to our website at www.mvfilmsociety.com and find information there. You can actually find access to all of these classes as well. But if you have a membership or would like to renew your membership or purchase a membership, you may do that as well. We are a nonprofit organization, so donations are happily welcomed, as well as your comments as well. So, until I see you next time, Well, I won't actually see you, but you can see me. Have fun at the movies. Bye bye.